Okay, Rex, you want to state your name and what years you were on the collective?
Of course. I'm Rex Frankel. I was wrote under the pen name Rex Frankel and also Malcolm Tent from 1987 to 1993.
And what possessed you to come on the collective?
Demonic, probably. I got involved in the environmental Pat Russell anti-development battles in the mid-1980s, and a friend of mine that I met, Patrick McCartney, ran for city council and invited me to join the collective because I was kind of hippie at heart, although I looked kind of credible when you met me. I was a real troublemaker inside, and so I liked what I saw on the Beachhead, and that's why I stuck with it for 6 years. And I wrote poetry and humor and investigative journalism, and I drew a few cartoons and took a lot of pictures. I distributed the paper for most of my 6 years to all the newsstands, drove it to the printer.
So you got the full treatment.
Oh, Jesus Christ, I'm totally jaded now.
So who were some of the other people on the collective with you at the time?
When I started, of course, it was Larry and Kathy Sullivan, there was Victor Whiteman, Diane Nickerson, Kelly Ball, and Patrick McCartney, Carol Fondler / Berman / Essie, Professor De La Yenta, Jim Prickett, who's now passed away. Of course, Carol passed away 4 or 5 years ago, and I think that's it.
What was the biggest issue that the Beachhead was involved in during that time?
Well, it was the issue that had always been the beginning of the Beachhead, I think, was that the wealthy interests in Los Angeles wanted to level all of Venice, and as it turns out, by the time I got involved, the wealthy interests in Los Angeles wanted to turn the surroundings of Venice into Century City, approximately 4 Century Cities worth of high-rises that would have made Lincoln Boulevard from a parking lot into I don't know what's worse than a parking lot. But that was the battle that largely was driving the community's effort and people getting involved, and the opportunity coincided with the election for the city council for Pat Russell, who had been basically running the Los Angeles City Council and representing this district since 1969. So for almost 20 years, she had total power over what happened in her district, and she was shepherding bringing back basically the demolition of Venice that the community had defeated 20 years before. And so that was, I think the reason was that Venice was going to be gone. You know, the battles had been fought and won over the last 20 years with the Beachhead and all kinds of activism, and the real estate financiers were planning to just completely wipe out not just the heart but the soul of Venice completely. And that I think drove most of the activism, certainly from what I saw.
You were involved in a movement of a number of captive neighborhoods in LA that wanted to become cities, right?
I was a member of several different movements to break away Venice, break away Westchester, break away Hollywood and the San Fernando Valley from Los Angeles. Incredible sums of money were spent to fight our efforts to become independent. It eventually got to a vote of the entire city of Los Angeles in 2002, and the Los Angeles Times and the Chamber of Commerce's spent gobs of money to oppose it. As it turns out, it ultimately lost in the city of Los Angeles as a whole, but it won in the San Fernando Valley. So
not that they got
not that it changed that much. I still strongly support it. Even the election of good council members such as Bill Rosendahl, Mike Bonin, I don't know how much people love him. I haven't dealt with him much, to be honest, but the fact of the matter is that when you had a city council person on our side like Bill Rosendahl on a lot of issues, he was the lone wolf. He and maybe one other member of the 15-member city council was standing up for us. So just electing your own person isn't good enough. That's why we've got to get rid of the rest of the 14 members of the city council and have a city council that represents Venice only, have a city council that represents Westchester only. That's the only way that you're going to keep the outsiders and the big money interests from completely controlling and devastating the heart of your community.
Maybe you partially answered it, but why do you think that the movement for secession or restoring cityhood in Venice never got more momentum than it did?
Venice is a very okay. The amount of money required to organize the community of Venice. Collecting signatures is one thing. You could collect whatever it was, I think 15 to 20% of the registered voters in the community, if I'm not mistaken. But then you have to, of course, pay for the costs of studying the whole effort. And that could run to $500,000 or more. So it's a huge effort. Then again, with crowdsourcing and all these other new internet-based methods of fundraising, maybe Venice could do it. But then again, Venice also has had one problem, is that it's oftentimes a transient kind of community in that it's kind of just like states in the United States are like this, like Alaska, where like 2/3 of the population every 5 years moves on, and Venice has had kind of a situation where activists come and go. As opposed to, say, some more stable communities. But it's definitely money. It's definitely a question of how much benefit it will be to the community. I don't see any downside, to be honest. If you look at what the city of Los Angeles does for Los Angeles, it's nothing. If you look at what the Chamber of Commerce that opposes independence does for Venice, it's nothing. It's a wonderful idea, and now would be a great time to start it again.
What was it like working with the collective? Were there a lot of disagreements, or was it pretty unified? Where did you meet? How did the whole thing go from startup to getting a paper out?
Well, we were a pretty passionate group, so sometimes there could be a bit of heightened emotions over some issues. One of the reasons that it never got too far was because of the ready consumption of now legalized medical marijuana. Certainly helped a lot in the early collective meetings. We met at the Fox Venice Theater for a long time, which is still now the Fox Venice Discount Store. We also met at Tenant Action Center. For a while we met at Larry Sullivan's house. I remember it was 407 Broadway and the heart of the hood. We met at Diane Nickerson's place down on Windward for a while in the later years. We've had a lot of nice people give us places to meet for free.
Towards the end, there were a lot of months that were skipped. Was that because of finances, or what was?
Definitely because of finances. The Venice Beachhead, up until the first 3 years that I was involved, it was entirely advertiser supported. Then what happened was that the Venice community started getting into an uproar over development issues, as different than the Venice development issues of 3 years ago when Pat Russell was thrown out of office. As it turned out, Ruth Galander, who took Pat Russell's job, started negotiating compromises and deals that in some cases benefited her own inner circle and frequently benefited development interests too, because she was trying to cut deals and get affordable housing, but she also was approving large-scale commercial and retail developments that were intensifying the community, and so that caused a bit of a split. And some people on the Beachhead were supporting the negotiating and compromise, and some were saying we're purists and opposing that. Largely what happened was that the Beachhead, the members of the Beachhead that stuck with it for the last 3 or 4 years until 1993 were the die-hard opponents of compromising and negotiating with developers. The last 3 years, well, basically what happened was that in February of 1990, the paper ran out of advertiser support because a lot of the advertisers in Venice perceived the Venice Beachhead as anti-commercial. So it became difficult to get advertiser support because people, I guess, thought that the Beachhead was going to oppose their future speculative real estate type developments. I know that the Sidewalk Cafe, which had been a longtime supporter, the owner of that property wanted to build some massive project on his property next to it, so he stopped advertising with us.
Yeah.
Anyways, ultimately, for the last, the paper, when it was revived in November of 1990, it was entirely financed by the writers themselves.
Oh.
I gave $200 an issue, and so whenever we wrote it and put it together every 3 months or so, approximately. We got about 12 issues, I think, approximately, during those 3 years, so about every 3 months. I certainly like the model that you have now, where you have sustainers that takes the heat off of the advertisers.
Definitely. What else do you want to say about the Beachhead to all the people watching this around the world?
Well, I'm just getting over a cold, so let me just say that Beachhead was my first brush with radical, seat of your pants journalism, fighting with the powers that be, pissing off rich people, taking on politicians, making them really mad at you, and not return your phone calls. I like that a lot. I've carried that on for the last almost 30 years now, suing real estate developers, working hard to save the Baiona wetlands, which is what we accomplished in 2003, continuing to sue corporate interests and challenge what they're attempting to accomplish, made me ultimately want to go to law school. And so I'm, after almost 30 years of litigation to save the environment and protect our neighborhoods, I'll be a lawyer soon. And I'll continue making trouble for as long as I can.
Beachhead will probably need a lawyer.
Yeah, I was lucky. During my period, we didn't need a lawyer. I heard you got sued before I got there.
Right.
But anyways, and if you want to read, I write almost exclusively on the web now, rexfrankel.com.
Right.
You can see it there. The Google is just a wonderful thing, I'd have to say, in that they host websites for free. So I've got.
We'd just rather have them in a different city, I think.
Yeah, so I've got a website called stopcorporategreed.org.
Yeah.
I've got one called Rare Earth News, that's on environmental issues. I've got saveallofbaiona.org, which actually also has the archives of the Baiona wetlands battles to save it. We have an environmental library there. We have all the back issues also of my term through the Venice Beachhead, and the newspaper I began publishing after that, which 5 or 6 years, called the Baiona Free Press. So we live on, not just in paper, but on the web.
This has been Jim Smith talking with Rex Frankel, who was a major player in the Beachhead in the late 80s and early 90s. Thank you, Rex.